From sacred smoke to scandalous thrones, a 5,000-year journey through intoxication, power, and spectacle. Part 1. The Seed, Cannabis and the Cradle of Civilization. Our story begins not with kings or conquerors, but with a humble, resilient weed. Around 5000 BC, in the harsh landscape of what is now Siberia, a Neolithic forager likely tossed the dried stalks of the cannabis plant onto a campfire. The intent was practical: warmth, light, perhaps to ward off insects. But as the smoke curled upwards, a deep, involuntary breath introduced humanity to its first documented psychoactive experience. There was no context, no culture of use, no vocabulary for the sensation. Imagine the raw, unfiltered confusion, the shifting perceptions, the sudden introspection, the vague, unplaceable euphoria. To that early human, this wasn't a high, it was a divine intervention, a momentary upgrade to their very consciousness, likely attributed to spirits or gods speaking through the fire. Archaeologists would later find cannabis seeds in these ancient burial sites, a profound testament to its perceived value. Someone thought this plant important enough to take on the ultimate journey, either as a sacred relic for spiritual passage or, as human nature might suggest, a simple comfort for the afterlife. From this accidental smoky genesis, a complex, global relationship was born. Initially, cannabis was survival. Its long, tough fibers, known as hemp, were nature's premier building material. They were woven into the first durable ropes, capable of binding shelters and harnessing animals. They were spun into coarse, long-lasting cloth, offering protection from the elements. The seeds provided a hearty source of nutrition. The plant was a botanical Swiss Army knife. You could sail with it, wear it, write on it, eat it, and, if you happened to burn it, you might find yourself having a deeply meaningful, if one-sided, conversation with a nearby rock. By 2700 BCE, this versatile plant had been codified into one of humanity's oldest systems of medicine. In China, the legendary Emperor Shen Nong, the divine farmer, was said to have personally tested hundreds of herbs, cataloging their effects in the Pensao Ching. Cannabis was listed as a treatment for over 100 ailments: pain, gout, rheumatism, and curiously, forgetfulness, an early hint of its paradoxical nature. To Shen Nong and the early Chinese physicians, ma, or cannabis, was a potent medicinal agent, a regulator of the body's vital energies. It was brewed into bitter tonics or ground into pungent pastes, not smoked for pleasure. Yet simultaneously, Chinese society was built on industrial hemp. Its fibers were the backbone of infrastructure: the ropes on ships, the canvas for sails, the cloth on backs. A person in ancient China could live a life entirely encompassed by cannabis, their home, their work, their records, and their medicine all stemming from the same plant. It was a seamless, practical integration of the plant's dual nature. While China systematized its use, to the west, on the vast Eurasian steppes, the nomadic Scythians were developing a far more visceral ritual. Around 1000 BCE, as recorded by the Greek historian Herodotus, these fierce horse-riding warriors would gather in small felt tents. They would place red-hot stones in a pit and throw handfuls of hemp seeds onto them. The tent would fill with thick, pungent, psychoactive smoke. Herodotus writes that the Scythians, inhaling deeply, howl with pleasure. This was no casual indulgence. It was a sacred, communal purification, a funeral rite to commune with the spirits of the dead and perhaps to steel themselves for the hardships of a nomadic life. Archaeological finds in Scythian kurgans, burial mounds, have confirmed this practice, unearthing ornate gold vessels containing residues of cannabis and opium, the original ceremonial braziers. For the Scythians, intoxication was a gateway to the spirit world, a collective, smoky baptism. This spiritual connection was amplified in ancient India. By 1500 BCE, cannabis was enshrined in the Atharva Veda, one of the 4 sacred Hindu texts, as one of 5 sacred plants. It was a gift from the gods, specifically associated with Shiva, the destroyer and regenerator. Legend says Shiva discovered the plant's rejuvenating properties after a family dispute, using it to calm himself and find meditative focus. Thus he became the Lord of Bong. Here, cannabis was consumed primarily as bong, a drink made from ground leaves and flowers, mixed with milk, spices, and sweets. It was integral to festivals like Holi and Mahashivaratri, where it served as a sacrament to break down barriers between the self and the divine, to fuel joyous devotion, and to facilitate transcendental meditation. In India, the plant's psychoactivity was not a side effect, but the entire point, a holy technology for achieving ananda, or bliss. The plant's philosophical potential was also recognized in Taoist China. By the first millennium BCE, Taoist alchemists and sages included cannabis in their quest for immortality. They burned it as incense during meditations, believing the smoke could open the gates of perception, allowing them to communicate with spirits, foresee the future, and achieve spiritual flight. They called it the liberator of sin, a plant that could free the mind from earthly attachments. This stood in stark contrast to the contemporary Confucian view, which saw such mind-altering practices as leading to social disorder and laziness. Thus, within a single civilization, cannabis was already at the center of a moral debate. Was it a tool for spiritual liberation or a vector for moral decay?
Part 2. The Spread. Trade, Transformation, and Notoriety. As civilizations connected, so did their habits. The Silk Road, that ancient network of trade routes stretching from China to the Mediterranean, became the primary vector for cannabis's westward journey. But it wasn't just seeds and fibers that traveled, it was ideas, rituals, and refined products. In Persia, the plant found a home among Zoroastrian mystics and poets. Physicians like Avicenna wrote of its medicinal merits, while Sufi mystics arguably used hashish, the refined resin, to achieve ecstatic states to feel closer to God. The Arabic world became a crucial laboratory for the plant, with scholars distinguishing between the industrial hemp, kinab, and the psychoactive resin, hashish. It was in the medieval Islamic world that cannabis faced its first major wave of prohibition and sparked one of history's most enduring myths. In the 11th and 12th centuries, a secretive sect known as the Nizari Ismailis, led by the charismatic Hassan-i Sabah, operated from mountain fortresses like Alamut. They were formidable political players, using targeted assassination to intimidate their enemies. Their opponents, seeking to discredit them, spread a potent rumor that Hassan-i Sabah drugged his followers with hashish before sending them on missions, giving them visions of paradise to ensure their loyalty and fearlessness. The word hashashin, hashish users, entered the lexicon, morphing through European languages into assassin. While the historical truth is far more complex, the Nizaris were likely strict and strategic, not perpetually intoxicated. The legend permanently linked cannabis in the Western imagination with hidden danger, fanaticism, and murder. This sinister reputation filtered into medieval Europe alongside more practical knowledge. Hemp was utterly essential. It rigged the ships that explored the world. It was the canvas for sails, the fiber for sturdy clothing and sacks, and the paper for early Bibles and legal documents. Europe's age of exploration was literally powered by hemp. Yet the church, hearing lurid tales from crusaders about the hashish assassins of the East, viewed any intoxicating use with deep suspicion. It was labeled a witch's herb, and its recreational use was suppressed, though it stubbornly persisted in folk medicine. Apothecaries quietly sold cannabis tinctures for pain, insomnia, and hysteria. The plant crossed the Atlantic with European colonists. The Spanish and English mandated its cultivation in the New World. Hemp was a strategic resource for naval ropes and sailcloth. In the 19th century, its medicinal use saw a brief renaissance in Europe and America. Queen Victoria's physician prescribed it for menstrual cramps. It was an ingredient in common tinctures. But the dawn of the 20th century, driven by a complex mix of racial prejudice, emerging pharmaceutical competition, and new bureaucratic powers, saw cannabis criminalized across the globe. The plant that had been a sacred sacrament, a medical staple, and an industrial cornerstone was rebranded overnight as a dangerous narcotic, a gateway to moral ruin. Its journey from Neolithic campfire to prohibited substance was complete, yet its story was far from over. Part 4. The Players, Scandal and Survival in the Courts of Power. If the Circus Maximus was the theater of the masses, the royal court was the theater of the elite, a world where power was played for in whispers, marriages, and daggers in the dark. Few figures navigate this treacherous stage more famously or controversially than Lucrezia Borgia. Daughter of the ruthless Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, Pope Alexander VI, and his mistress, Vanosa de Catane, Lucrezia was born into a family that treated the papacy as a dynastic enterprise. Her life was a series of strategic marriages orchestrated by her father and brother, Cesare. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza was annulled on dubious grounds of non-consummation when the Borgia's political needs changed, leading Giovanni to famously accuse Rodrigo and Lucrezia of incest, a charge that, true or not, defined her poisonous reputation. Her second marriage to Alfonso of Aragon ended when he was brutally attacked on the steps of St. Peter's and later strangled in his bed as he recovered. Cesare was the obvious suspect. Lucrezia's precise role remains debated: a weeping widow, a knowing accomplice, or a passive pawn. Contemporary propaganda, fueled by the family's enemies, painted her as a consummate poisoner, adept with a mysterious ring of venom. Her final marriage to Alfonso de Este, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara in 1502, marked a profound transformation. Arriving as the infamous Borgia daughter, she applied her intelligence and cultural education to reinvent herself. She became a respected and capable duchess, a patron of poets like Pietro Bembo and Ludovico Ariosto, and an effective administrator. After her family's downfall following her father's death, she cultivated a persona of pious matronhood, distancing herself from her Roman past. In Ferrara, she found the legitimacy and stability her birth family never provided. Her legacy is a Rorschach test, a testament to how a woman's reputation could be weaponized in a patriarchal world, and a case study in the art of survival and reinvention. Centuries earlier, another woman wielded power on a continental scale, defying the constraints of her era. Eleanor of Aquitaine, about 1122 to 1204. Heiress to the vast, wealthy Duchy of Aquitaine, she was the most eligible woman in Europe. Her first marriage to the pious King Louis VII of France was a failure of temperament. She accompanied him on the Second Crusade, where her behavior and rumored closeness to her uncle, Raymond of Antioch, sparked scandal. The marriage was annulled in 1552. With breathtaking agency, just weeks later, she married the dynamic and ambitious Henry Plantagenet, 11 years her junior, who became King Henry II of England 2 years later. This union created the Angevin Empire, a sprawling domain that stretched from Scotland to the Pyrenees. For a time, they were a formidable partnership. She bore him 8 children, including the future kings Richard the Lionheart and John. She presided over the legendary Court of Love in Poitiers, where chivalric ideals were debated and refined. But the marriage soured, fueled by Henry's flagrant infidelities and his attempts to marginalize her power. In 1173, she supported a rebellion led by her sons against their father. The revolt failed. For her betrayal, Henry imprisoned Eleanor for 16 years, moving her from castle to castle. She was not freed until Henry's death in 1189, when her beloved Richard ascended the throne. Even in her twilight years, Eleanor was a force of nature. She ruled as regent while Richard crusaded, famously crossing the Alps in winter to secure his ransom when he was captured. She helped secure the succession for her youngest, problematic son, John. She died at 82, having outlived almost all of her contemporaries. Eleanor's life was a masterclass in resilience, showing how intelligence, political acumen, and sheer force of will could allow a woman to shape the destiny of nations, even from behind prison walls. Conclusion: the eternal dance. The threads of our narrative, the psychoactive plant, the collective spectacle, the personal drama of power, are woven from the same fundamental human material, the desire to transcend the mundane. The Scythians sought communion with ancestors in a smoky tent, just as the Roman plebeians sought ecstatic release in the roar of the circus crowd. Lucrezia Borgia and Eleanor, in their vastly different ways, sought to transcend the rigid roles assigned to them, using the tools of diplomacy, culture, and sometimes ruthless strategy to carve out realms of influence. Cannabis represents a chemical key to altered states, embraced as sacred, useful, or medicinal, and condemned as heretical or dangerous. Its history mirrors society's struggle to categorize and control the human urge for mind expansion. The Circus Maximus represents the state-sanctioned collective alternative, a carefully controlled frenzy that reinforced social order as it provided cathartic escape. The stories of Lucrezia and Eleanor reveal the intimate, high-stakes theater where personal ambition clashes with dynastic destiny, where reputation is both armor and weapon. From the first unintentional inhalation by a Neolithic hunter to the calculated political maneuvers in Renaissance Italy, this 5,000-year journey shows a constant dynamic tension. It is the tension between the individual's quest for altered consciousness and the society's need to regulate it, between the crowd's thirst for spectacle and the ruler's need to direct it, between the person seeking power and the structures designed to contain them. This is not just a history of a plant, a stadium, or a few famous women. It is a history of humanity's eternal, complicated, and often contradictory dance with intoxication, power, and release. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be the first to know when new videos drop.